calls today to ask some questions about the decision made by the U.S. Attorney's Office on behalf of the EPA, and I thought it more efficient if we could get together to discuss the issue. I'm grateful to be joined by the Congressman from this district, Congressman Stephen Lynch, who's been a true ally to the city in so many ways on so many issues. Also joined by a number of experts in the room. We have public works folks and outside engineering firms, our legal team. If there's anyone who wants to get any specific questions about the action taken by the U.S. Attorney. Quite frankly, I'm outraged by the action. We've been at the table for months with the U.S. Attorney's Office and folks from the EPA working on issues that affect the city, the waterways of the city, around the city. The city has spent tens of millions of dollars over the last decade in working to solve some of the challenges we face environmentally, and that program has continued. I'll go back to previous administrations, and millions were spent on both sewer and stormwater improvements across the city. So this city has not ignored this issue. In fact, quite frankly, we've been proactive on this issue right along. I was a kid that grew up in Quincy, as many did. We used to swim at Wollaston Beach growing up, and Wollaston Beach is 100 times cleaner today than it was when we were kids. The reality is we've made tremendous progress. In fact, one of the items that the U.S. Attorney cites in the lawsuit, a leaking sewer line in Squantum, was fixed more than a year and a half ago. I'm not sure why she wasn't aware of that. The reality is we've been at the table meeting on these issues time and time again. I will not, on behalf of the city of Quincy, sign a consent decree to commit tens and tens more millions of dollars going forward to some of these issues. I do not believe the EPA is being reasonable. I think it's a federal government overreach. We are a city, 7th largest city in Massachusetts, and we have some great colleagues in local government that control local issues. So it concerns me greatly that the U.S. Attorney has made this decision. A tolling agreement that we had going forward was ended today. We had reached out and offered to extend that agreement so we could continue to work at the table on these issues, but the U.S. Attorney decided not to do that and to go the route of a lawsuit. So I'm really disappointed because of the folks on behalf of the administration that have been working very hard on this issue at the table for the last several months for the federal government to come in and to do something like this. In fact, I've asked my city solicitor to look at the possibility of countersuing the EPA. It's interesting how they view we're not working fast enough when we've been for more than 4 years in a permitting process to try to replace tide gates at Blacks Creek, which is a very important component of flood control for a number of Quincy neighborhoods, and it would improve the health of the marsh. So I've asked my city attorney to look at that, to countersue the EPA, because the timing just doesn't seem to make sense to me. When we make decisions locally, I go to the city council every year with a budget. There's 9 city councils that debate that budget, and we make decisions what the priorities are for the city going forward. And each and every year, the city continues to have invested in our environment, in our schools, in our public safety, in our libraries. It's an outstanding community to live in. We have excellent services. But I also say we've been fortunate in this robust real estate market to see some great new growth, which helps us to fund that. But I also know when I took office back in 2008, and the financial crisis hit the fan, and it was a worldwide issue, that we had to make tough decisions of what those priorities are for those local dollars in the pie that we have to spend. And this market's not continue to go the way it's going. I'm not going to commit the city going out 10 or 20 years with those kinds of financial decisions, and perhaps down the road we're making major cuts in public safety and education so we could fund a program that I believe is a program that is one that is very aggressive, too aggressive. And I go back to that term. I just think the federal government is, particularly the EPA here, is overreaching. It was my hope that we could work this thing out. I want to remind people out there too, particularly the people of Quincy, that this isn't unique to Quincy. That there are a number of communities over the last several years that have been sued or signed consent decrees with the EPA. I've chosen not to do that for all the right reasons. I believe we've been doing the right thing for the environment in the city for a long time. And that's about not just the mayor of Quincy being Tom Koch, but all of my colleagues in government have been on the same page, working very hard on this issue for a long time. So I'm disappointed, and quite frankly, I'm angry at this point. So I'd offer at this time for the Congressman to make a few remarks, and I would be happy to take some questions. But if you look to my left, your right, and you look at some of these binders that are on the table, those are the things we've been getting done over the last decade here in the Quincy. And all of this information has been shared with the EPA. So I'm a little confused on why they've chosen this route at this point. So again, I want to thank the Congressman for joining me today. I'm not sure why you wanted to join me today, but I certainly appreciate it, Congressman Lentz.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's because you need me with you on the tough times as well as the good times. And look, Tom Koch is a great friend and I think a wonderful leader here in the city of Quincy. So I'm here on his behalf and on behalf of the families of Quincy. We have been at this for a while. I've been part of the effort to solve some of these issues for an older city like Quincy on environmental problems that are really widespread across the country. Matter of fact, ironically, number one, I have a great relationship with the EPA in general. They've been wonderful in some of the other towns in my districts where we've had to clean up brown sites, brownfields, and you know, toxic waste, things like that. So they've been great on some other issues. I'm very, very surprised at the sort of sudden action here to file suit against the city of Quincy. And I can honestly say that, you know, since I've been a member of Congress representing Quincy, we've had yearly efforts to address this. You have to realize that as the mayor and as the city council, they're trying to balance, you know, how much money to put into some of these efforts, because, you know, if you overload one effort on the environmental issues, then you've got to lay off some policemen and firemen, you've got to lay off some teachers, and there's an effect, a reciprocal effect in some of those other areas that have to be shorted. So I think the efforts have been genuine, they've been earnest to deal with some of the environmental issues here in Quincy. I wish that the EPA had shown a little bit of patience and also some contact with me. I happen to be a member of the Water Systems and Environment Subcommittee as of about 3 weeks ago. I was appointed to that issue, to that committee, and handle that issue. So, you know, I think there's a way forward here that would allow the city to make those methodical and important investments in the environment. I do want to point out that, you know, we're negotiating the new National Flood Insurance Program. And so whether you talk to my Republican or Democratic colleagues from Louisiana or Mississippi, or folks out in California or other coastal communities here in Massachusetts or Rhode Island or New Jersey, we're all being faced with epic storms. And so one of the things that was pointed out today by the U.S. Attorney was that, you know, during these storm events, that there was contamination as a result of the sewer systems, the older sewer systems, being overwhelmed. Well, that is new and different over the past 7 to 10 years. So the systems that were meant to address the weather patterns, you know, 20 or 30 years ago are being overwhelmed here. But that is not because of the negligence of municipal and state officials. That's because of climate change. And so we have to recognize that there's a federal role here to help municipalities and help the states build resilience into their systems and upgrade their systems so that we can face these new superstorms that are impacting these communities. So I'd like to have a partnership. I don't want the EPA suing the city of Quincy. I represent those families. So there's a way forward here, but it's going to take all of our patience and diligence in working together to make that happen. So I think the suit today is a step backward. I think it fails to recognize the honest and earnest effort made by Mayor Koch and the people of Quincy in addressing this problem. I think it's incremental, the need in terms of how we address some of these situations. And I agree. You know, I live in South Boston, but I've spent, my family all moved down to Quincy years ago, most of my dad's brothers and sisters. And So we've spent a fair amount of time here over the years. And Quincy today, including the coastal parts of this beautiful community, tremendously improved. And you can see that. You can see that in the marine life and the amount of people coming to our coast and enjoying those resources. So I just want to reiterate my support for Tom Koch and the people of Quincy in this effort. And I asked the EPA, let's sit down. Let's suspend this lawsuit. Let's sit down and work together. We can figure a way forward, just like we did in Walpole when we were dealing with the toxic residue there on a number of their properties. We worked it out. It took a little time, but the result now is that we just built a new fire station, a new police station, and a new public service facility on the land that used to be contaminated. So, and that's a partnership. That's how a partnership works, and that's the relationship that we want to have between the EPA and the city of Quincy. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Mayor, you seem a little surprised, shocked maybe. So you had no idea this lawsuit was coming?
I thought we would continue to work in good faith, both sides, because we've been at the table, both sides, with our experts. We have some incredible, talented people in Public Works with our Public Works Commission engineers. We have some amazing outside engineers, the best in the business, working at the table on this issue for the city. We've got great legal minds on this issue, both from our solicitor's office and outside counsel. So we've been at the table working in it. So decision for the U.S. Attorney's decision to make this, I guess I shouldn't be completely shocked, but I'm hugely disappointed. We're at the table working with one another. We have shown tremendous evidence of the incredible improvements we've made over the last decade. We're poised to spend $10 million over the next year on both sewer and stormwater improvements, which is something that we have been planning. We're not, our love for the environment doesn't come from the EPA. We love our environment because this is our community. These are our natural resources. We want the best for our residents. But as I go back to that comment about overreaching, the federal government knows best for local officials. I have a real problem.
Mayor, when this is going on in a number of communities, why do you think Quincy was a target here of this lawsuit?
Well, different communities, different years have been addressed by the EPA on this issue. Some have been sued, some have paid penalties, some have signed consent decrees, and some have gone to court over the issue. So I can't tell you, I can't get into their mind which communities they pick which year, but it's not unique to Quincy.
You mentioned you've been at the table. When were you first made aware of these particular issues and concerns?
I think it's more than a year ago. Not sure beyond that.
And what exactly is the issue? Like, I know it's an older city, you probably have older equipment. What do you think, or the EPA thinks is causing these?
Well, we have a separate sewer system. We belong to the MWRA. We have our own sewer department, and we've been working aggressively for decades in the city, replacing sewer lines, relining sewer lines, so that sewer is not seeping out and falling into what would be the storm drains. The storm drains are a completely separate system. Some communities have a combined system. We do not. So those storm drains go out to more than 80 tide gates and flow out into the ocean, into the rivers. And you get bird waste, you get dog waste, you get other contaminants that fall into the storm drain system. It's certainly not intentional, but it happens. Now, we've been working, again, with our experts and our engineers to improve every year on that water quality released out to the bay and the rivers and so forth. So there's been a long history of the city doing the right thing here.
When was the last time that city attorneys met with EPA officials?
Jim, when was the last meeting that was held with the two teams?
It was last fall.
Last fall.
Is there any cost estimate
But there's
for
been documentation going back and forth since that meeting.
cost estimate for what the EPA wants the city to do?
It would be tens and tens of millions of dollars over the next decade.
Have you calculated the total amount of fines that you're looking at here in this lawsuit?
I have not, Jim, I don't know if you guys want to comment on that time in the lawsuit.
What's that?
Fines, possible fines.
Fines.
Fines and the timing on
Excuse me. There was a fine component, and that was one of the issues that we could not reach agreement on. The U.S. Attorney had talked about some particular numbers, and we had talked about doing something called SEPs, which is supplemental environmental projects. Like instead of just paying the money in terms of a fine, we'd spend the money on related projects. So at the point in time when the discussions kind of stopped, the fines were still an issue we were talking about. We felt all along that fining a municipality, particularly in light of the work that the mayor's just outlined, wasn't appropriate. So that was a tension point throughout the discussion.
Do you think they did this to try to speed up the process, get you to work faster instead of expanding it out?
That could be, but the EPA has never worked too fast in my history. You know, I speak to that Blacks Creek area, which wouldn't be necessarily familiar to you, but we have 3 major tide gates under the Quincy Shore Drive Greenberg Bridge. That is a flood control area basin. All of the Furnace Brook in West Quincy flows down that creek and river. So when we have a storm event coming, we close those gates. That gives us capacity then to hold that water in, and when the tide goes out, we open those up so that the neighborhoods don't experience the severe flooding we would without those gates. Now those gates are old, and we have to close them way before a storm because you have to close them at dead low tide. So therefore the marsh suffers a little bit by having them closed that frequently. Well, our plan proactively was to replace those gates so that we could put gates in that could be closed and open at any time, which would continue to have the flood control part of it, but also help the improvement of the marsh. So we're nearly 5 years. We're trying to get permits from the EPA to replace those gates. So you tell me EPA's timing.
Going into the summer months, can you reassure Quincy residents that the water's safe to swim in?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a beaches commission. We have the Friends of Wollaston Beach. We have a very active coastal community. And the folks that have lived here a long time have seen incrementally improvement happening. You know, you couldn't, when we were in Wollaston Beach as kids, you couldn't see your ankles looking through the water. Today, the clarity is incredible. The congressman alluded to the marine life coming back. We were once the capital of flounder fishing in this country. People used to come from all over to fish off of Howe's Neck before the MDC started to dump raw sewage into Quincy Bay many years ago. Thankfully, that's been cleaned up, and the MWRA is doing great work in separating that out. So, yeah, the beaches are safe. There was a rule that we always, as kids, shared, and everybody talked about it. Look, the day after a heavy rain, you stay out of the water. It was just common sense. Storm drains go out into the water, and things get into that storm drain system. So I would continually advise people to do that. But the beaches are cleaner than they ever were. When we were kids, they weren't testing the beaches. They get tested on a regular basis. We test them. Our own health department tests them because we want the best for our residents as well. The reality is there's been great improvement, and we'll continue down that road, but I believe that the lawsuit and what the EPA wants is far too aggressive for the city of Quincy and the residents to afford.
When will you make a decision about whether to countersue?
Within the coming weeks, maybe days.
Why hasn't Quincy signed any consent decrees?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Why hasn't Quincy signed a consent decree?
Why hasn't Quincy signed a consent decree? Because I don't believe that, first of all, I don't believe the EPA has recognized the good work that we've done. It's not like we haven't been doing anything in the environment or on these issues, number one. Number two is, I am not going to sign something that assigns a penalty to the city because I do not believe we intentionally did anything improper. In fact, quite frankly, the Department of Public Works over there has gotten awards for the great work that we're doing in the environment. So I, further would say that once you sign a consent decree, you put on paper how much the city is going to spend over the next 10 to 15 years without even knowing what our 5-year outlook is going to be for revenue going out. And I don't want to be in that position of laying teachers off or firemen off because we have to meet a certain quota assigned by the U.S. Attorney's Office.
You mentioned a tolling agreement, if you just want to elaborate on that.
Yes, a tolling agreement is a legal term which both sides agreed to continue to work on the issue to try to settle it, and there was a deadline on that. We offered to extend that, and they chose not to.
And how long was that agreement in place for before?
That agreement was in place, Jim, for how long?
About a year and a half.
Until yesterday, right?
Today. Yesterday or today?
Today.
Yeah, it ended today.
But we had offered to extend it.
Correct, I think I've stated that on more than one occasion, we offered. Any other questions?
What's Jim's last name?
Jim Timmons. And I'd hang around if anybody has any individual questions. If you want any questions of our engineers, of our attorneys, and talk about some of what you see on the desk there, that's real projects that have been accomplished over the last decade. We're committed, not because of the EPA wants us to do something. We're committed because this is the city we love. This is the city we grew up in, and this is the city that we're maintaining. And the natural resources in the city are phenomenal, and we're going to continue to maintain them at the greatest level we possibly can. So I thank you for coming out today, and certainly hang around.